Today, August 25th, marks the long-awaited sequel to the most well-known cult classic video game of the early 2000s, Psychonauts. Continuing the adventure after the events of Psychonauts and the Rhombus of Ruin, a VR title that bridges the gap between the first and second games, Psychonauts 2 looks like it's going to offer a lot of what made the original games great, with plenty of additions and quality of life fixes to make a triumphant return to the form. But today, I'm not going to talk about the sequel and all the splendor I'm sure it'll have within it. Mostly because I haven't had a chance to play the game yet, and I'm likely going to be playing it now that this video is live. Instead, we're going to step back and look at the original game for a little bit, and talk about one of the more memorable parts of that game, the campers at Whispering Rock Psychic Summer Camp. While playing through the original Psychonauts, players are able to explore the various areas of the Whispering Rock campgrounds and interact with the many side characters who are there as fellow campers and psychic cadets. Each of them have their own personalities, their own looks, story arcs, and everything like that, and today we're going to talk about which ones are the best and which ones are the worst. You know, your typical judgment of children. This is just a simple tier list video where I talk about the various kids at Whispering Rock and determine which ones are good characters and which ones are forgettable. I asked my good friend Jimbo to help me with this one since we both love this game dearly, both of us calling it our favorite game and each having played it through several times, so we've seen these characters in action multiple times over, and are therefore fit to judge them like this were some sort of demented beauty pageant where beauty didn't factor into anything. I'll be segmenting them off into one of three categories. The big brain characters are the ones we feel are the most fleshed out and memorable, the wrinkle brains are the ones who are mainly just there, and then the smooth brains are the bad characters, who are either underdeveloped, uninteresting, or problematic. But we'll get into that in a bit. This should be a fun little video to help celebrate one of our favorite games of all time, so let's just get into it so I can be that much closer to finally playing Psychonauts 2. While he may have some minor development in the story and acts as Bobby Zilch's right-hand man, Benny the Nose FIDELEO is a little punk whose main defining traits are his nose, his ears, and the fact that he's Bobby Zilch's right-hand man. He can't hold his own in a fight, he cowers way too quickly whenever he's not backed up by the more intimidating Bobby, and ultimately becomes forgettable within Bobby's large, looming, cotton candy-shaped shadow. He's such a lackey that he even asks if Coach Oleander needs a sidekick once Raz tells him about the coach's evil plan, meaning even he doesn't see any potential in himself, and as such is a smooth brain all the way. While Benny may be a sniveling weakling who can't seem to do anything for himself, Bobby is a very confident and self-made man. Kid. Bobby is a massive bully to just about everyone in the camp, but that also means he is easily one of the more fleshed out characters considering he's a minor antagonist towards Raz early on in the game. Between his sniveling voice, awkward beanpole design, crazy hairdo, secret crush on Chloe, and his unique victory dance that Double Fine brought back for Brutal Legend, he's one of the most well-known campers in the bunch. That said, his cruel attitude towards others and his innate desire to cause pain makes him a bona fide jerk and a half. Just based on my own criteria here, Bobby Zilch would be defined as a big brain, but I don't like Bobby because he's a bona fide jerk, so instead I'm going to classify him still as a big brain, but in that Markiplier is big brain time sort of way. Pull one over on this beanpole of a child. One of the youngest kids at the camp, Chloe is so obsessed with space and extraterrestrials that she believes herself to be from another planet. She can be seen around the camp performing flight tests, tinkering with the radio and loudspeaker to try and get her message out to the stars, and wears a space helmet at all times. Even using clairvoyance on her reveals that she sees Raz as a green-skinned alien, which is honestly just a really cool touch. She may always have her head in the clouds and far beyond that, but she's certainly one of the more interesting characters in the game. And as such, she's so big brain, she's out of this world. So for this list, there's going to be a few pairings because some characters just spend all their time together and have essentially complementary personalities, and we have arrived at our first pairing. Clem and Crystal are practically inseparable throughout the game, but while they may spend their time together, they ultimately share a personality, and that ultimately demotes them both. While the idea of an almost symbiotic relationship between the two is kind of fun, it comes at the cost of individual goals and dreams, making them essentially Peppy Boy and Peppy Girl. The fact that they both have suicidal thoughts and almost act on them over the course of the story is something that's easy to miss, as are their attempts at potentially murdering the rest of the campers. But all this does is add at least a little bit of depth to their character beyond just cheering for their fellow campers, and that's it. Plus, it's sadistic fun to watch them both get blasted out of Coach Oleander's head, so there's that, I suppose. For me, Clem and Crystal are just a pair of wrinkle brains, nothing more than that. Dogen is one of the most well-known campers at Whispering Rock, with an interesting backstory of accidentally blowing up people's heads, talking to squirrels who want him to kill everyone, and being the kid who Raz watches gets his brain removed. I mean, come on, who wouldn't want to be friends with someone like him? Dogen is a lovable young potato-shaped scamp who anyone would be lucky to be friends with. Assuming, of course, you're alright with the potential of having your head explode scanner style, and as such, he is very much big brain. Elka is the typical sort of preppy girl who goes to camp looking for a summer romance and to cause some drama. This happens when she breaks up with Nils, starts to date JT, yells at Chops for wanting to hang out with his best friend JT, and then ends up getting back with Nils in the end anyways. I can't say she makes smart choices considering Nils is a future Harvey Weinstein just waiting to happen, but she at least has a personality that's memorable and offers at least a little bit of a side story worth remembering, so I would say she's at least a wrinkle brain in my mind. Elton is the child of a sailor who died, and in his trauma began to develop psychic abilities that allowed him to communicate with fish, effectively making him Aquaman. Aside from him having a crush on Lily before he has a relationship with Milka after she scares away Bobby and Benny for being mean to fish, and the fact that he gets blown up almost immediately in basic braining, making his ability to talk to fish more like one of those silly trivia facts rather than something important to the game really demotes him in my mind. I mean, the least they could have done was have him talk to the lungfish at some point, but that's not something we get, so here we are. All in all, Elton is just kind of there, and thus, he's a bit of a wrinkle brain. Frankie and Kitty may be the only confirmed LGBT couple in this 2004 game, which if true, on its own is fantastic and way ahead of its time, but that's really the only main characteristic that these two really have. They extort Raz for an arrowhead early on in the game, but otherwise they just sit around making friendship bracelets and doing each other's nails. Props to the developers for including what is essentially an LGBT couple, but in terms of personality, these two don't really have one, especially when you consider that their actions in the game, primarily them extorting Raz for their arrowhead early on, could really be done by just about anyone else. So basically they're smooth brain. JT is one of those characters you see added to an ensemble because they have a stereotypical token trope that defines them. In his case, he's the cowboy kid. He talks like a cowboy, dresses like one, plays the harmonica by the campfire. All that's really missing is him eating beans and firing a six-shooter. I mean, at the very least, you get to watch him do a bit of target practice with his side blast, but it's not quite the same. His biggest moment in the story involves the relationship triangle between him, his temporary girlfriend Elka, and his best friend Chops. But considering how much potential there is for a psychic cowboy, I just feel like he got really wasted in this story. I'm just gonna kinda go for broke and call him a wrinkle brain here. Maloof is one of the easier targets for the bullies Bobby, Zilch, and Benny, thanks in part for him being so young and small. It's only when he befriends Mikhail that he starts to develop a backbone of his own, and it's in that moment that the true colors of who Maloof is are revealed. Maloof becomes almost like a mob boss in training with how he bosses around his muscle Mikhail, him constantly commenting about how things are going to change, and even taking the matter of learning about Oleander's plot into his own hands by strapping an explosive to the coach's Jeep. Maloof may be a weakling on his own, but he commands a presence thanks to his soft-spoken nature with a bodyguard nearby, and as such, Maloof is certainly one of Psychonauts' big brains. Chops is the third member of the camp drama trio alongside Elka and JT, and he is somehow the least defined of the bunch. Elka has her snotty attitude and poor judgment regarding Nils, JT has his whole cowboy shtick, all Chops really has is a cool nickname and a sweet polygonal afro. While he himself might not get much development as an individual, his inclusion in the aforementioned trio helps elevate him just a bit, and as such, he's right by his buddy JT and stuck as a wrinkle brain. Mikhail is Russian, so of course that means he speaks with a thick Russian accent and wants to wrestle bears for fun. Throughout the course of the story, he befriends Maloof and becomes his bodyguard, helping the timid young boy deal with the bullies who have been tormenting him and giving him the confidence that he needs. Mikhail is certainly a force to be reckoned with within the small gaggle of campers, so between his distinct personality, his bodyguard status for Maloof, and the fact that he still just wants to wrestle bears, he is a big brain for sure. Milka turns invisible, likes Elton, and scares Benny and Bobby away by pretending to be the lake monster. That's about it for Milka. She does get some points in my book because invisibility is an underutilized power that I am very glad was not relegated to Nils for obvious reasons, but I do wish we got to know more about her outside of the fact that she doesn't like to be seen. Milka still manages to get wrinkle brain status in my mind, and I hope that her and Elton are happy together, because when I was younger I had a crush on Milka and was jealous of Elton, but neither of them are real, so I'm the one who walks away the fool. Made enough jokes about him that it's about time we talked about this little creep, huh? Nils is basically the Minetta of the Whispering Rock campers, constantly talking about how much of a ladies' man he is and being an absolute creep. and thus I hate him. This kid needs to be Me Too'd as soon as possible, because he's one inappropriate gesture or comment away from a visit from the Whispering Rock Psychic Summer Camp HR department and a cell next to Bill Cosby. If I could, I'd give him a rank lower than Smooth Brain, but I already spent time establishing the tiers for this video, so I'll just make him the bottom of the Smooth Brains and try my best to forget about him even more. Phoebe and Quentin are our final pairing. They are the two musically inclined campers at Whispering Rock, and with the exception of when they have their brains removed, they can basically just be seen inside the main camp building jamming out. There isn't really that much else to know about them, and since they only have one character-defining trait between them, that pretty much makes them Smooth Brains. What do you say we close things out on a high note, huh? Vernon is the camp chatterbox who, if you let him, will just drone on in his simple, monotone voice. He's a kid with a lot to say, and anyone trapped into listening to him will certainly get an earful. That said, he clearly does have some compassion for his fellow campers, worrying for Dogen, Frankie, and Kitty after they are debrained and disappear, but I think that's more because he wants to make sure they hear the end of his story. Vernon is one of the more memorable campers at Whispering Rock, and as such, this hero of the game, as told in his lengthy retelling of the events, is certainly a big brain. And there you have it. 19 children ranked based on whether or not we found them to be interesting and memorable. Honestly, each of the Whispering Rock campers helps add a little bit of extra life to an already vibrant and wildly stylized game, and pretty much all of them are fun to interact with and see progress throughout the events of the game that takes place over the course of about 2 days. Except for Nils. Nils is a little bastard. Anyway, I'm going to go now because I want to play Psychonauts 2 and see what over 15 years of innovations can truly do, not only to the gameplay, but to the new assortment of side characters that maybe 15 years from now, I'll take the time to judge in a similar fashion as this. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you aren't already and do all the fun YouTubey stuff down below. Follow me on Twitter where I post the occasional poll and silly things like this. And I will see all of you in the next video. Take care.